So this is the new 2026 Adidas Predator Elite FT, which is not only the lightest Predator ever, but it's also had a lot of changes from the previous generation. So in today's video, I'll talk about how those changes affect the boots, but also of course mention what it does well and also not so well, to hopefully help you decide if you should buy a pair of these bad boys or not. As always, I'm J-Mike, and this is my review of the Pred 26. Yeah, changes. There are actually quite a few of them, but one of the biggest is that Adidas have said goodbye to the Hypertouch 2.0 upper and instead introduced Nano Strike Plus, which is based on a thin textile mesh with re-engineered striking elements on top. And that changes the feel quite a bit. Because that mesh upper here is super thin, and it just feels a lot thinner and, sharper than on the Pred 25. However, the mesh upper is also, how do I say it? Well, it's just a little bit stiffer and, feels a bit more rigid out of the box than Hypertouch 2.0, which definitely was not what I expected. The good news is, though, that it will soften up and it will actually become nice and soft and malleable around your feet. But the bad news is that it does require some break-in time to get there. And also that the breaking-in period was longer than I had anticipated. However, when I finally got there, it reached a point where the textile mesh actually feels softer than the Hypertouch 2.0 upper, in the sense that it feels ever so slightly thinner and more textile-like and not as rich as the Hypertouch material. And to me, it feels as if the mesh is more easily deforming. And what I mean by that is that you can more easily manipulate it with your fingers or your toes, and that it just more easily takes to the shape of your foot than the Hypertouch did. And that also means that you get a slightly sharper, thinner, more raw sensation where the upper feels a bit more skin-like, more naked around your foot compared to the Hypertouch boots that just have this more native softness to the material. However, Adidas have kept, and I really like that, this nice, slightly fluffy but thin suede liner on the inside that just adds this little gentle touch to an otherwise pretty direct and raw feeling upper. Now, one thing that had me a little bit worried is that Adidas have made some cutouts in this part of the midfoot, probably to get the weight down to 200 grams. But because you have the rather solid Adidas stripes right on top of that area, the lateral midfoot stability is actually really good despite the material being so thin. So that's not a big worry. And with a lockdown that is, I would say, okay, and a relatively snug fit overall in the Predator, I actually didn't experience too much movement of my foot inside of the Preds. So that's a nice thing. And now that we're talking about lockdown, let's move to the heel here, which to me feels identical with the previous Preds. You have this prime knit piece in the back, and I don't for the life of me understand. I mean, it looks cool, but why not give us a stitch and turn color like the one you have on the Copa Puras, or, even better, the F50 Plus Spider Unisport SBUs. It would have been perfect. With that said, though, this fits okay. Has this foam piece and a heel liner that gives a pretty nice heel lock-in. And, I have a relatively slim heel, so it's okay. But if you have a slightly wider heel with a bit more volume, I actually reckon it's gonna be pretty good because you have a nice pinch here to the heel. So depends on your heel shape, but the heel is okay. But that's a missed opportunity. Now, shape-wise, I do actually find that the Predator 26 here feels quite similar to the 24 and 25 in a lot of areas, at least. Like I did mention, it is on the more snug side, the fit, with a relatively narrow midfoot here, which reminds me a lot of what you got in the Predator 25. However, the height of the toe box here has actually changed a little bit. If you look at them against each other, there's just more volume, more height on the toe box on the Predator 26. You can also feel that internally, there's just a little bit more space to wiggle your toes, probably because the upper package is a little thinner, but also because it's just higher. Similar to what Nike did on the Phantom 6. And don't get me wrong, I love that really low, pointy, very close feeling of the toe box when it comes to dribbling. But when we're talking comfort, having just a little bit more, I would say, natural volume around the toes feels really, really good. When we're talking size, I went through the size with this and I'm really happy with it. It's close, but because you have the higher toe, it's actually fine. But if you're not into that slightly close, more intimate feel, going up half a size is definitely also a possibility. Width-wise, it's, I would say, medium width. It does have a snug midfoot, but because you have the fold-over tongue and that
big opening, you can adjust the midfoot width a little bit more. And even if you have a wide foot, if you're okay with that up close and personal sensation, it should be okay.
Now, I also mentioned that the striking elements have changed. Gone are the SL rubber fins from the Predator 25. Instead, they've been replaced with smaller islands of SL rubber that have little spikes on them. And then there's a raised grip print in the midfoot.
And as you might expect, the touch is quite different here. So the Predator elements feel, I would say, less prominent, and it makes the touch a little bit more uniform in the new Preds compared to the Predator 25. And because the upper is that much thinner, it's probably also the thinnest and closest touch I've had in a Predator for as long as I can remember, and perhaps even ever. Also, it's not as obviously sticky when you strike the ball as what you got with the strike skin from the Predator 25. Don't get me wrong, it's still very grippy, but it just feels more like gritty and shark skin-like compared to the more tool-like, really sticky sensation that I got from the strike skin in the Predator 25. So you definitely feel that there's lots of grip to manipulate the ball, but it's just not as in your face as it was before.
The outsole is also new and brings back the iconic power spine for a more stable midfoot as well as a new stud pattern.
Now, in the tech sheet for the boot, adidas say that the power spine is supposed to give you, and I quote, a stronger shot, which I'm not too sure about. But what I am sure about is that I like that it's back. Not only does it look really cool, but it also gives you this really strong, powerful, stable sensation underneath your midfoot that just has, you have a good base to push off from. So I'm a big fan of that. What I also like is the updated stud shape and pattern here, which Adidas have made a little bit more aggressive. So you now have larger, flatter surfaces on the studs. That it just gives it a little bit more bite when you push off and you change direction. That's really nice. But also because you still have these rounded edges on the outside, they also rotate fairly well in the ground. So it is nice and responsive, a little bit aggressive, but it also has a fairly good balance to it. And yeah, I think it's a good update. What I also like is this little reinforcement piece on the heel. It just adds a little bit of stiffness, stability on the bottom part of the heel counter, and just gives the heel, it helps the heel lock down and the stability on that part of the boot, which, top marks for that. I'm a fan.
However, it's not everything that I'm super happy with. So here are 4 annoying things that you also need to know about.
The first is this, initially at least, stiffer upper material that does require a slightly longer break-in time. And if you're coming from the Predator 24 or the 25, the Hypertouch boots, you will need to have a bit of patience before the boots soften up to the point that you're used to. And I mean, in 2026, where most boots are just plug and play, for this to require some break-in time probably could and should have been better. And personally, I'm glad that I had the patience, and I kinda had to because I'm testing them, but it just might put some people off. And that's a shame. And if you like the strike skin fins on the Predator 24 or 25, these, in my book, don't feel as sticky on the ball, which is also one of the things that makes the boot feel very uniquely Predator. And it's especially a thing in the wets, where it's just not as grippy on the ball as on the last generations.
Also, overall, the Predator now has a slightly more speedy feeling compared to the last few years, which personally, I don't mind, but it might not be for everyone.
And finally, the lockdown around this part of the heel, both on the inside and the outside, is, for me at least, not top of class. And I can actually squeeze a full finger down the side of my foot when I wear these, which I don't think I'm supposed to. And I realize it's tricky when you have the bit fold over tongue and, the opening to make it feel completely tight and sit flush around your foot. And it has been a problem on both the 24 and the 25. The good thing is, though, that if you go on the regular Elite, it's gonna sit a lot tighter, if it's a problem for you. I just wanted to mention.
So, lots of changes actually. And while it's carrying over the same Predator DNA, it still feels different.
It's just a closer, thinner, sharper version of the Predator. Dare I say, slightly more speed boot-like, which some people will like and others won't. Now personally, I'm still a big fan of the Predator 25 with how unique and still very easy it is to just pick up and enjoy. But if you give the Predator 26 the time it deserves to soften up, it's gonna still give you that uniqueness and still with this very honest, sharp, and modern feel on the ball, and with an absolutely outstanding outsole. But guys and girls, what do you think of the Predator 26? Well, let me know in the comment section right down below. Remember that if you just want to buy the boots and try them out for yourself, you can get them in the link to Unisport right over there. Subscribe to the channel with the notifications on. And now, man's gonna go inside because it is cold. Why do we keep releasing boots in the middle of winter when it's like sub-zero? Cheerio.